see all of you, and welcome to the people who are here for the first time. Thank you for joining us. Hope you will plan to join us again, because if you do, you'll find this is a great group of supportive people. So thanks. As you all know, I plan to, the Chamber's purpose is to build a stronger, more prosperous community. And we're here to provide access, resources, connections, tools, and solutions to our businesses. At this time in particular, our goal is to help you manage your business through this crisis phase and to help position our businesses as we move into the recovery phase. Our most important role is to be the voice for our businesses, and we've been working very closely with our partners around the state and around the country. In particular, we just signed on with we are a coalition partner with the Small Business Advocacy Council. That is one way we amplify our voice as a small community, by partnering with other organizations to advocate on behalf of our businesses. So we just signed on to a letter to Governor Pritzker requesting a deference of sales tax payments for all eligible businesses. At the moment, it is limited to restaurants and bars. So we believe that all eligible businesses should be able to participate in that as well. I just spoke with the president of the Illinois Chamber yesterday, who wanted to talk to me about the needs of members in our community. And he and I discussed reopening guidance. So they are working on that, as are we. And then as for upcoming programming, we are working now to put together something with a panel of marketing experts so that you can have some guidance on that as we move forward. On May 21st, we're partnered with 17 other chambers for the first virtual Mega Connect. So if you're interested in that, you can register for that on the chamber website. And I just learned yesterday that the mid-year economic summit, in which we partner with also a large number of chambers, will be held virtually on June 17th. So that might be a great program for you to sign up for. So with that, I am pleased, delighted to welcome and introduce Ken Henry. Ken Henry is a labor and employment attorney, and he is also this year the 2020 chair of the Chamber Board of Directors. So Ken, welcome, and thank you for presenting to us today.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. I'm trusting everybody can hear me okay. I now have two offices in Highland Park, one in Chicago, although I haven't seen either of the other two in quite a while. Let me start this by saying your guess is as good as, maybe not as good as mine, but your guess as to what we look like going forward is pretty good because we're in uncharted territory. Okay, this is not anything that any of us in our lifetimes has experienced. So part of it has to do with common sense, and a lot of it has to do with kind of keeping up with what's going on, which is difficult. As many of you may know, the governor yesterday came out with a Restore Illinois plan. That's a 5-phase plan that divides the state up into 4 regions. This is it. If you haven't seen it, I think we've got a link to it on the chamber website. Is that right, Jenny?
We put it out yesterday on Facebook, and I don't think we put it out in an email yet, but it will be on the chamber website today.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So not surprisingly, I mean, it sets forth how to move forward, but it doesn't say when, not dates, which is not surprising because it is a fluid situation. Yesterday, Illinois had the most deaths that it's suffered among our citizens since this thing started. So that's going to be fluid. In the meantime, we have a number of things that are going on in the employment field. And it's as I said, it's keeping me kind of busy, kind of crazy, which is a good thing. You know, lawyers are an essential business like liquor stores, and I've always felt the two go together. So let's talk about this a little bit from a historic perspective. Back in March 21st, Illinois issued the stay-at-home order. It was, I think, the second or third state in the country to do that. On April 1st, the Families First Coronavirus Response Act was passed. And so for those of you who deal with the Family Medical Leave Act, had to deal with those provisions. And many of you who have not dealt with the Family Medical Leave Act prior to that time, because you didn't have 50 employees, were also required to deal with that statute because it applied to pretty much every employer in the country. So that was April 1st. On April 16th, in a moment of optimism, the White House issued their guidelines for reopening America. Again, the guidelines were a three-phased approach, but primarily it stated that they were going to assist state and local governments and tailor the approach to meet local circumstances. On April 16th, OSHA, which is an agency that I used to represent in a prior life, and which is, I've said at many chamber meetings, it's a small town in Wisconsin that I-9 gets you to. They issued relaxed regulatory compliance for COVID-19 cases. And what their memoranda essentially said was that they are going to relax their regulatory authority, and that if employers are making good faith efforts to comply with OSHA standards that require annual recurring audits, reviews, training, assessments, that kind of stuff, if they're making good faith efforts, they're probably not going to cite them for any kind of violations. What you need to understand, however, is that there is no federal regulation that governs COVID-19, okay? It is covered under what we in the business call the General Duty Clause, which is Section 5A1 of the statute that says that employers have to maintain a safe and healthful workplace. Well, what does that look like? It looks like, among other things, and as required by an Illinois executive order that was put into place by the governor on April 30th, all Illinois employers are required to provide employees with face coverings, masks, and all Illinois employers are required to maintain 6-foot social distancing where possible. And if not, the employees are required to wear those face masks on the job. That shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody. And that's for essential businesses. We don't even know, ultimately, I think it's phase 3 of the governor's plan. I'd have to look at that, I won't swear to that. Where non-essential businesses start coming into play, they're gonna be required to do that too. So all employers are really, really well advised to take a look at their workspace. And what that means is this. They're going to have to look at how close their workers are together and maybe reconfigure workspaces. They're going to have to provide employees with face masks. They may want to consider staggered shifts so that they have fewer people on the job at any one time. They may want to put in directional foot traffic, like if you've been to the Jewel in Highland Park, my understanding is they have directional signs on the aisles, which make them one-way. You may want to continue, and the governor has encouraged, and the laws encourage people to continue to work from home. There's talk about contact tracing for employees who report and may be ill or may have been in contact with other COVID-19 positive people. There's talk about screen arrivals. In fact, in today's Wall Street Journal, there's an article that it's entitled, Offices Prepare to Reopen with New Surveillance Tools. So this is going to create, I mean, you know, it's a heyday for lawyers, frankly. I hate to say that. But they're talking about balancing the needs of employers and the needs to get work done and the need for privacy with a need to try to maintain safe and healthful workplaces. So some employers, in fact, some buildings, primarily in New York City that I was reading about, are talking about taking the temperature of everybody who walks in the door, or sending out questionnaires to all employees in the door. And this includes not only employees, but visitors as well. Sending questionnaires around to employees just every day saying, how are you feeling? What's your temperature? Are you showing any of these symptoms? They're going to ask people whether they're taking public or private transportation, because public transportation is, of course, an area where you have the potential of being more exposed. So what it's doing is placing a big burden on employers to balance trying to get work done and the safety of not only their employees, but visitors. And these restrictions are going to apply to visitors as well as employees to a certain area. There's also going to be, you know, employers are going to want to consider, for those of you who travel on the job, what does that look like? And what are your, you know, what are the restrictions on that? So it raises a lot of issues. You know, let me get to that page. Okay. Awesome. So let's take a couple of issues, and then frankly I'm going to open it up to questions, because there are more questions than there is. I can't give you a bright line test to say this is right and this is wrong. Under wage and hours. So for example, for people working from home, how are you keeping track of their time? The employer is still required to maintain accurate time and attendance records. That's not only for wage and hour purposes, and not only for exempt or salaried as it were, as well as for non-exempt or hourly employees. Under the Illinois Department of Human Rights, as some of you may recall, back last summer there was amendments made to the Illinois Human Rights Act that require, among other things, mandatory sexual harassment training for all employers, for all employees, by the end of this year. The Department of Human Rights was charged with coming up with a model training program. They were supposed to do it by February. They finally did it last month. It's available on their website, and I think we're going to probably hook something up to that from the Chamber website as well. But that's mandatory. And so far, there's been no talk of extending that compliance date. The United States Department of Labor is requiring that employers post the notice regarding rights under the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. That's this. And that, among the other employee notices that you have to have up in the workplace, that needs to be posted. The EEOC recently issued some guidelines regarding accommodating employees who have medical conditions, who may or may not be able to return to work because they're highly vulnerable. Well, they withdrew those just the other day because there was some controversy with them. So don't think that the protections of the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Age Discrimination and Employment Act and their state counterparts are being suspended here. They are not. Now, how that is going to impact employers and employees remains to be seen. There was recently a case in Kansas, because like I said, this is just a moving target. The employees those of you who watching the news, and God only knows how can you not in these days, because it's either that or reruns of NCIS. There was recently a case that employees brought against Smithfield, the meatpacking company, alleging that they had unsafe and unhealthful work conditions in their plant. Well, a federal judge in Missouri tossed that case out. I think it was just yesterday. I'll tell you in a second, because I've got it right here. Yeah, just yesterday. Here it is. Tossed that case out, saying that it is counter to the regulatory authority of agencies such as OSHA that govern safe and healthful workplaces, and that the employees do not have a separate private cause of action against the employer for that. There's also a move, if you read the Wall Street Journal, in Congress to shield businesses from liability for employees who may contract COVID-19 in the workplace. And I don't even know what that looks like. Is that a workers' compensation issue? It might be. And there's the trying to balance the need to feel safe with the right to privacy. So for example, if I'm your employer and I take your temperature every day, is that medical information that I have that's now covered by HIPAA, for example, for those of you who know the privacy requirements of HIPAA? What can I do with that? Who can I allow that to? Am I allowed to ask questions regarding your medical history, your medical vulnerabilities for purposes of COVID-19? Because under HIPAA and other privacy laws, employers are not allowed to know those things. You can tell them if you want to voluntarily, but they don't have a right to ask. So the issue of privacy is something that is going to play out in a big way in this thing. There's also the notice that the state issued. That's this notice. That's the state COVID-19 workplace health and safety guidance for employees and staff of businesses. And it talks about, and again, it's another, for those of you who have major workplaces or any kind of workplaces where you post the employee notices. There are any number of notices from the feds and from the state regarding minimum wage, regarding OSHA, regarding EEOC, and all these different aspects of law that govern the employment situation. This is another notice that has to be posted, and it talks about 6 feet of physical separation, marking signage, as we talked about, keeping 6-foot spacing, not only for employees, but for customers, providing safe face coverings to not only employees, but people who enter your workspace, frequent hand washing, hand sanitizers, regular cleaning. It encourages you not to work if you're not feeling well. So there are a lot of challenges here for essential businesses. And as we move through these phases, because as the governor says in the Restore Illinois plan, the ultimate solution to this is a vaccine. It's not going to be normal as it was, most likely, until there's a vaccine. And although the president thinks there may be a vaccine by the end of the year, most medical people think he's a little bit overly optimistic. I hope he's right. So we'll just have to see. So at any rate, those are the requirements right now. And that's for essential businesses. Non-essential businesses are not allowed, they're still not allowed to open up. It's under the governor's plan. They're not going to be allowed to have gatherings of more than 10 people. I figured they picked 10 because it's a minion. For those of you who know what a minion is. And for those of you who don't, it's a gathering of 10, basically 10 men. But you know, it's a minion. I'm all for that.
Did you just say that to see if any of us were listening?
Thanks, John.
I'm sorry, I have to chime in. All I see are those little yellow people from the cartoons.
Thank you, because I am not looking good in yellow and I don't wear glasses.
So and as I said, people are guessing. It's a trade-off. If you've listened to Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, who I have found to be very interesting, what he has said is the issue to be discussed at the highest policy levels and at every level, at our level, is the balance between maintaining the health of ourselves. I mean, let's not put this in the third person. Maintaining the health of ourselves and the people who work for us and with us, with the need, frankly, not just the desire, but the need to have an economy that's functioning. And that's a tough balance. You know, who was it? Former Governor Christie likened it the other day to people who went off to war in World War II. They knew what they were getting themselves into, kind of thing. I don't quite see that analogy, frankly. I don't think it's applicable, but it is something that we need to consider. How do you balance it? That's what hopefully the science and the medical professionals will guide us, not the politicians, because that's what we need, in my estimation. Other people may disagree. I'm okay with that. But this is unfortunately not a political issue, or fortunately not a political issue, or shouldn't be. So we'll have to see what transpires. You know, I'd encourage everybody to read the Restore Illinois plan that the governor has put out. It's pretty well thought out. It gives guidelines. It just, you know, the state's going to tell us when the various areas, you know, the greater metropolitan Chicago area is one region. Then there's North Central Illinois is one region, Central Illinois is a region, and Southern Illinois is a region. And it's broken down into 5 phases. Arguably, we're in phase 2, but I wouldn't even swear to that. And I haven't heard the governor say that we're in phase 2 yet. So there's a long way to go on this. And frankly, we all need to be careful. So that being said, I know it's not a lot of answers. It's a lot of, you need to think about this and look at your workplace and figure out how can I keep social distancing, keep people safe, get face coverings. And I think face coverings are much more readily available now than they were at the beginning of this. And conduct business in a way that allows us to go forward. You know, Texas, for example, I think it was Texas, said restaurants can reopen at 25% capacity. Well, how many restaurants can make a living on that? So when we come out of this, I think the world is going to look a lot different. Small businesses are going to have a steep climb to get back. The larger businesses, I think, are a little bit better equipped to deal with something like this and to re-emerge in a different way. But we'll just have to see. It's going to look different, and it's going to look different for I think a long time.
Ken, thank you. Would you like to start taking questions now?
Yeah.
Great. Well, I know we have one question already in the chat. Mike, do you want to start with those?
Yeah, of course. Anyone else, if you have a question and you feel like writing it down, the chat's a great place for that, and then I can read them out. First one comes from Tanya from Street Level Studio. Her question is, in Pritzker's phased plan, it talks about offices opening up, but it's at the same phase as gatherings of no more than 10. My office staff is 15. Does that mean not everyone can come back to work at the same time? 15 are spread out throughout the building, so is that okay? Just don't all congregate at once in the conference room?
I would interpret it as that, Tony. Look, there's no detail attached to it, but I would say that if you have 15 employees, you can have them all come back as long as they're not all together. So if you can have work accommodate them that they're 6 feet apart from each other and not gathering together, I think that that's what's contemplated, but we'll have to wait and see. Because or as I said, one of the things we talked about is you can, if it works for your business, you can stagger people coming in and out, so you never have more than 10. But I think it's 10 congregating as opposed to 10 people in the general space. That would be my interpretation.
That's all that's in the comment section. Anyone else want to unmute themselves and chime in with a comment or question? Ken, you covered everything.
No, there's another question here. Sorry, Scott sent it, but it came just to me. It says, as a bankruptcy attorney, how do you think the foreclosures will look as compared to 2008? Eventually, someone needs to pay the piper or the bank.
Let me say this, Scott. Thanks for asking. I haven't actually. I used to do a lot of bankruptcy. I don't do as much bankruptcy as I used to. So I'm going out on a limb here a little bit. But the governor has delayed any foreclosure actions, eviction actions through, I think, the end of May. But I think we're going to see an upswing in bankruptcies. It's inevitable that we'll either see an upswing in bankruptcies or assignments for the benefit of creditors, and because people are just not going to be able to pay their bills like they were able to. I think it's in that regard, it's not going to be dissimilar to the last recession, frankly.
So Ken, I have a question on the privacy, and you were talking about, excuse me, about HIPAA. If you're like Summer Classics corporate down in Alabama, they just reopened, and when they have employees coming in, they are taking the temperature, but it's done kind of in a separate place past the entryway, so not everybody sees you getting your temp taken, and they're being very careful as far as keeping the records separate in the HR department so nobody else sees them. But in a store like ours, we have 5 people. So if you have somebody that has a temperature and you scan them and you say, you got to go home, how does that work with HIPAA? Because everybody's going to know.
It's a problem, Bruce. I would, first of all, the data and information that I've looked at seems to indicate that the belief of people at a higher pay grade than me believe that taking somebody's temperature is not necessarily a HIPAA violation and maintaining that. But the issue is, as you state, people are going to know when that person goes home. The person who takes the temperature is, number one, potentially compromised, and 2, has information that may or may not be protected. I think there's going to be a little bit of leniency so people can comply, but for a smaller employer, it's a problem. I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but if you decide you want to do that, or maybe the workaround on that is to have people take their temperatures at home before they come into the office, and if you're running hot, you stay home. Because one of the things they do encourage is you know, a lot of people who are kind of, there's kind of a macho mentality. Even if they're not feeling well, they want to go to work and do what they need to do and that kind of thing. I know we've probably all suffered from that at some point in time. But at this point in time, if you're not feeling well, you need to stay home. And I think employers are going to send people home, and they'll probably be protected doing that during this time, you know, because it's a different time.
Hey, Ken, I have a question to piggyback on that. My brother-in-law works at Jewel Osco, and that he told me that somebody was discovered to have the virus, and they wouldn't tell anyone who it was. Doesn't that open a whole can of worms?
Yes and no. There's a certain privacy attachment to that, of course, which is why they don't want to share that information. In fact, in my building downtown, the one north of the Sale Street building, they have told us that there have been a couple of people in various suites down there who've been identified with COVID-19. And then they told us, you know, about the steps they've taken to deep clean and clean the elevators and all this kind of stuff. But they wouldn't identify the floor or the entity or the person. It's a balance, Scott. And that brings up the need for contact tracing, which is something that we've heard a lot of the medical professionals talk about. When somebody in a workplace has been diagnosed with a positive for COVID-19, then they need to test all those employees who have come into contact with that person. And you can do that without, I mean, look, are people going to realize perhaps at some point in time that who the person is? Probably so, particularly in a small work environment, because the person's not going to be there. But what it brings to the fore is the need to have testing, which has been an issue nationwide, although I think Illinois has finally got a handle on that. But it's testing and contact tracing so that they can find out who that person has been in contact with. So do I see a need to reveal the person's identity? No, I don't.
They're making everybody take their temperature upon arriving. But yeah, my question is, if you're working next to somebody who's contracted it and you don't know that, I guess eventually you would know it because the contact tracers would contact you.
Right, and I think that even if they're not doing contact tracing, for example, if in a workplace somebody's diagnosed with it, then I believe the employer is under an obligation to test everybody who's in that workplace. I would say, and even if it's not a legal obligation, I would say that is the better view of how to deal with this thing. You know, err on the side of caution. And so I don't know what Jewel Osco was doing, but I would say if they had called me, and I used to know their general counsel actually, if they had called me and said, what should we do? I'd say test everybody who at least worked that shift and probably every other shift too, because you don't know.
Rebecca asked in the comments, is there an extension to COBRA benefits?
I haven't seen that, Rebecca. It may come about. You know, the fact of the matter is they're making up the rules as we go along. I think those of us and those of you who may have applied for the payroll protection program, for example, the SBA didn't have a clue what they were doing. John would be happy to tell you that. And they were changing the rules as they went along. They're
still changing the rules. They're still changing. I tell everybody that the PPP and even the EIDL, for that matter, is the same. It's akin to flying a plane cross country while somebody's still in the back building the engine, or driving a freight train 1,000 miles ahead while you can see the people laying the track in front of you.
Yeah, so there's no telling. It would not surprise me if, well, it would surprise me because healthcare is such a volatile issue in the Congress. You know, there's talk now, if you've read the paper about a bill in Congress trying to gut the entire Affordable Care Act, for example. And regardless of what you think about that, you know, this would seem to me to be the most inappropriate time to try to take healthcare away from many people who can't otherwise get it. So will COBRA be extended? I just don't know the answer to that, Rebecca. We'll have to keep an eye on the Congress and see what they do. Just like with some of these other things. You know, there are a lot of requirements that employers are under that may need to be extended because of these circumstances.
There are a couple other questions that have come in. Both of them related to temperature, so I'll kind of consolidate this. Susan says, what about customers or clients? Will we need to take their temperatures? If not, what's the use of taking anyone's temperature? And related to that, Nancy says that temperature may or may not be an indication of the illness. And until we get the widespread rapid test in use, we really won't know if someone's contagious because it's not always that's the indicator.
I think the answer to both of those is correct.
Yeah. Yes, all of the above. Yeah.
Michael and Martina, JD. Yeah, I think you're right. You know, everything we've read said, you know, temperature is an indication, not a definitive indication. That's number one. And frankly, number two, on you know, do you need to have clients or other visitors to your workplace have their temperatures taken? If that is a strategy that you utilize to try to maintain a safe and healthful workplace, I would say yes. I would say anybody who walks in the door. And in fact, you know, as one of the articles I was reading this morning in the Wall Street Journal sets forth, a number of these landlords in major buildings in New York are requiring that of everybody who walks in the door.
There's a supermarket off of Tui that I'm told, I haven't been there because that would be far too much of an adventure in today's world, that as you walk in, they have some sort of a device that can measure your temperature as you're walking into the store, and it displays it on a giant screen TV right above, and will tell you if you can, if you're allowed to enter or not. It's wow. A supermarket apparently in front of the Walmart, just west of the Edens, across the street from Lincoln
Mm-hmm.
Village.
Yeah, and if you read this article I was referring to this morning in the Wall Street Journal about offices prepare to reopen with new surveillance tools, there are all these tech companies out there who are developing apps that will measure your temperature, will measure if you're doing proper social distancing. I mean, they're really, to me, they're pretty invasive, frankly. But we'll see what happens. And then the question becomes, you know, at some point in time, let's be optimistic. We get a vaccine for this. Will employers keep these surveillance strategies in place? And what does that look like? I mean, I guess that's for a webinar in a year or two. But, you know, it's a balancing act that, as we've talked about, you're going to have to look at your workplace and say, what will work for us within these guidelines? You've got the CDC guidelines. You've got the state of Illinois came out with their guidelines in this plan. And there's just a lot of data out there, and it is evolving every second.
Susan responded, are we allowed to then refuse entrance to a potential customer into a retail establishment?
Yes, I would say yes, absolutely.
Particularly, Susie, in your business, it's a private enterprise. It's not a essential business, so you particularly can.
It'll really give me a great reputation.
We're open by appointment only.
And that'll spread quickly. She doesn't let you in.
Well, you're the safest retail store in Highland Park.
Yeah.
You know,
we are doing that. So we have about 10 different things that the client has to be responsible for when they come in the store. And one of it is wearing a face mask and everything. So when we do open, we'll have that posted, and we're going to have like a greeter basically at the front door that explains all that to them and explains, you know, how the store is laid out, and we'll have like arrows through as far as guiding people around the store, so they don't just all go everywhere. They can kind of like at Jewel, they're, you know, guided through the store. And you can definitely, from what I understand in the other states that are opening right now, they've had to turn some people away that refuse to wear a face mask.
So we're going to be like the restaurants in New York, maybe with a letter in the front window. You know, you're an A, you're a B, you're a C for your quality control and your cleanliness and germ-free environment. I could see that happening in the future too.
Yeah. And we'll have a station at the front of the store that has hand sanitizer, face mask, gloves, things that will hopefully make people comfortable coming in the store knowing that it's safe and that we're doing those. And, you know, if somebody gets turned away and starts complaining that that's the store that won't let you in, well, we're doing it because we're protecting everybody. So I think that will respond pretty well.
For those that are interested and or having a hard time finding a way to check people's temperatures in a respectful way, we do a lot of work with thermography and thermal imaging cameras. And I wouldn't recommend the $1,000 or $2,000 cameras for any of that, but there are adapters that any number of vendors sell for your smartphone so that only the person looking at the screen sees the temperature, and it just attaches right onto your smartphone to be able to give you a very accurate to within 1/10 of 1 degree temperature of somebody. So if that's helpful.
Tom, can you send us the information and we'll put that out to everybody too?
Not a problem.
Thank you. I wanted to add that there was a study done in April, and it was primarily done with restaurants and grocery stores, but the information is still applicable. Consumers apparently are most concerned about fellow consumers, more so than they are about the establishments that they will be walking into. And from the survey that the Chamber did a couple weeks ago, a number of the responses that we saw were that the business owners were concerned about the consumers, you know, people coming into their establishment. So that seems to be, you know, kind of an overriding concern.
I think another situation that's come up recently is how the consumer treats your employees when they have to correct them. And that's something that you need to prepare your employees for, or just have a backup plan of how you're going to step in and be the buffer, because we didn't hire these individuals to be first responders, and they've become first responders in many senses. And that's an adjustment that they need to be helped through.
And I know that the Illinois Retail Merchants Association has put out information relative to that about consumers who may not wish to be cooperative, whether it's refusing to put a mask on or whatever, and the guidelines that they're issuing are how to respond to that, literally contacting first responders to help you out with that, so that you don't have to confront the person.
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you look at the governor's plan, you know, we're arguably maybe in phase 2, at least through phase 3 and phase 4. The Illinois Department of Public Health is supposed to be issuing guidance on numbers of people who can be allowed in, continued social distancing, capacity limits for stores, clubs. Bars and restaurants don't open up with limited capacity until phase 4, for example. And all of this is going to depend upon what the numbers look like, frankly, and what the guidance is from the Illinois Department of Public Health. And there has been nothing that I've seen so far, maybe it may have come out while we've been talking, they have not issued guidance on those things. So, you know, you need to stay up on what's going on in your industry. And some industries are tougher than others. Like I said, you know, John said the bank is by appointment. I know banks that I deal with are by appointment only to walk in the door.
Yeah, we're drive-through operating through the drive-through, and sorry to Dana, but our Ravinia location doesn't have a drive-through, so we did close it temporarily.
No worries.
But we are open through the drive-through or by appointment if you need to get to your safe deposit vault or do something. But we've even done using the camera system and everything else. We've even had to do notary and whatnot through the drive-through.
Right, and I happen to be a notary, and actually the state has come out with guidelines.
There are mobile notary rules.
To be an electronic notary,
right.
And there are certain rules that apply to that. Or you look at, you know, I'm a Starbucks fiend. Fortunately, the one by Fort Sheridan is a drive-through, and it's been open throughout this. The one on 41 just opened today, as I understand it, and it's a drive-through. The one in downtown Highland Park at Renaissance, I understand, is open, but you have to walk in there. So I don't know how they're doing that. My guess is you're not allowed to walk in without a face mask, maybe one at a time. I don't know. I haven't stopped by. But be creative, but be reasonable and be safe.
All I know is that for the information released yesterday, they could have made it into a better acronym. Well, if anyone else has any further comments or questions or thoughts, Ginny, you have anything to close with?
I was just going to say, if anyone has any suggestions or is in need of any specific information, please let us know, because this is the type of information we'd like to put out to everybody. Chances are, if you have a question or are needing something, other people may be as well. So we are happy to pull our cadre of experts together and share them with all of our business community. So thank you all for coming. That's all I have.
If you want to view this again or want to think about anything mentioned in here, we are recording this and it will be posted to the business resource page of our website.
As well as documents, the documents that we discussed.
Yes, yeah. Things are being added there daily, so check back for further information if necessary. Otherwise, email Ginny and I for any other comments or questions. We'll be happy to help you all. Thank you for joining us. Thank you,
Thanks,
Ken.
guys.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.